Introducing Fred Hoffman.
I'm really excited to be here today to share some information with you. Usually when I take the stage, I see a lot of people in the audience looking at me thinking, why should I be listening to you? Why should I believe anything you have to say? Who are you? Well, I'm not anybody special. I'm really not any different than you are. What makes me different is my life story. I've had a lot of things happen in my life that brought me or pushed me really to where I am today. But before I get started, I want to just give you a little statement that was quoted by an ancient philosopher 500 years before Christ. And this statement has really stuck in my mind, and you'll know why when I say it. He said, "Sometimes the truth is so unbelievable it escapes becoming known." Let me say it again. Sometimes the truth is so unbelievable it escapes becoming known. Now just think about that for a minute. How could the truth escape becoming known? Well, if it was unbelievable. In other words, if people didn't accept it, then it would escape becoming known. People would just push it off to the side. And that really reminds me of what has happened to the information I'm going to share with you. I'm not really such a brilliant person. I don't have a laboratory that I stay up in late at night looking under a microscope. But I do have a gift of a logical mind. And if things don't make sense to me, it's hard for me to accept. And by contrast, if something does make sense to me, even if it goes against what is normally accepted in the mainstream, that's what I stick with. If it doesn't make sense, maybe you need to question it. To tell you a little bit about my background, I really have to go back to my childhood, and this is what really pushed me to get into this field that I'm in. I grew up with a lot of health problems. I should say I was born with a lot of health problems. I had a bad heart, I had severe allergies, I had severe asthma. By the time I was 8 years old, I had been stricken with polio. This was 1958. Just imagine, we don't really hear about polio much anymore, but in 1958, kids were dying of polio. And I remember not really being afraid to die, but I was afraid for my parents having to go through my death. And I cried out to God for the first time, and I said, "Please heal me," because I know it would be devastating to my parents. And do you know I was miraculously healed? I was only in the hospital about 2 weeks, and to this day, I don't have any symptoms from that experience with polio. I bring that up just to not get you to be feeling sorry for me, but just to let you know that there has been a pattern, a set of signposts, mile markers through my life that made me realize that somehow I was connected to God. I'm not saying that I was anybody special, but I knew that God was trying to do something, get my attention at different points during my life. And that was the first one that I can remember when I reached out to God, and He answered me. That was in 1958, and I remember going to the doctor and listening to him tell my parents once more how bad I was. And a very prophetic thing happened. I remember looking up at that doctor just like it was yesterday, and I said, "Couldn't I take vitamins or something to help build myself up?" Remember, this was 1958. We didn't have health food stores in the mall like we do today. We didn't even have malls yet. So it was a very unusual thing for a little kid to say in 1958. So again, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just trying to set the background for where I came from. Well, by the time I got into college, I was taking 2 shots in each arm twice a week of an experimental allergy treatment that was basically called systematic desensitization. They were injecting me with those things that I was allergic to, hoping to set my body up to have a little bit more normal immune response. In other words, trying to make me desensitize me to those things that I was reacting to or overreacting to. 2 shots in each arm twice a week. I did that for a year. And afterwards, I remember telling my doctor, I'm not going to do this anymore. And he said, why? What are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, this is the best medical science has to offer. And I said, well, it's not good enough for me. It's not working. I quit. And I left the doctor's office and started to do my own research. This began a 40-year career of doing research on health and nutrition. What causes health? What causes unhealth? And how do you restore health if you've had a lot of problems? To my amazement, with the information I learned, a few supplements, and some dietary changes, I was healed of the symptoms that had plagued me for 19 years. I was motivated. I was excited. I was amazed. Why didn't the doctors know about this? Why did I have to go find it out for myself? It was what would somehow later become almost common knowledge that diet has an influence on your health. Most people would assume that's correct, but back then doctors thought that was a joke. The only way to treat disease is with drugs and surgery. That's the schooling that they've had. They haven't had schooling in nutrition, so it seems like a joke to them. Well, this went on for about 10 years, and I was really starting to enjoy life for those 10 years, and I started getting involved with, not in a dramatic way, but I started doing some physical things. And one of the things that I liked to do was to ride a bicycle. And I lived out in the country, and I would ride this bike long distance. And this is where the second prophetic thing happened in my life. And I had been riding my bicycle through this little town, and it was a little farm town, and they were having a town-wide garage sale. Everybody had their garage door up, and there were things in the driveway, and it was a town-wide sale. But here I was on a bicycle. Why would I stop anywhere? I didn't have any way to carry anything. But something compelled me to stop at this one house. This was the last day, the end of the day of this weekend garage sale. And I stopped at this little house, and I saw a table there, and it had some old books on it. And I was a little bit interested to see what these books were. And I saw 2 books that really caught my attention. One of them was a little Bible, a little leather-bound Bible. It was old, and it looked like it had really been abused. It had what appeared to be knife slices in the cover of it. And I turned it over, it had a price of 10 cents. And I thought to myself, I wonder what would happen if I don't buy this Bible. Would they just throw it away? And literally, I felt like I was rescuing God's Word when I bought that 10-cent Bible. And there was another book, and it was an old health book. It was simply titled Acid and Alkaline. Those two books changed my life, had a profound influence on my life. Of course, you can imagine the Bible, why it influenced me, but the book on acid and alkaline opened my eyes to some principles about health that I wasn't aware of. I didn't know that there was a balance in all living things, having to do with internal chemistry, having to do with an acid-alkaline balance, acid being the opposite of alkaline. I was surprised to learn that most living things are alkaline, including humans, and that through dietary influences from what we eat and what we drink, we can actually shift that balance toward the acid side. And this starts the influence of health problems. In other words, a lot of the problems we have with our health aren't because we were just randomly stricken with disease, as the doctors believe, or we inherited these things, but it's actually caused by things that we do to ourselves, things that we didn't know were causing a bad influence on our health. But we have an internal environment, and that internal environment has a chemistry. And that chemistry has a balance. When it gets out of balance, bad things start to happen. Slowly at first. You might notice when you first start becoming more acidic that you start having some aches and pains. Then you find out that if you become a little bit more acidic that you start having more frequent colds and flu. And then you might find out that you're starting to experience some lack of energy and weakness. And then it can go all the way to the extreme where you're starting to really develop some very complicated symptoms that put you in the category of certain diseases. And these categories can range all the way from arthritis to diabetes to multiple sclerosis to even to cancer. Now, this was really exciting for me because it was the first time I'd seen a reasonable explanation as to why people got cancer. But all of this started me in the direction of satisfying an insatiable curiosity about cancer, which was quite unusual. I didn't have any family history of cancer. I'd never known anybody with cancer. Why was I so curious about the cause and treatment of cancer? But something was pulling me in that direction. My friends thought I had a death wish. They thought it was a pretty morbid subject to be studied. They wanted to go out and party, and I was wanting to read books. But the long and short of it is, I studied for about 5 years, heavily focused on cancer. If I came across a story of someone who had survived cancer, I would do my best to try to contact them and find out, what did you do? And then I started thinking, if one person could survive cancer, why can't more people survive cancer? And I thought, it's because of a lack of information. People don't know that there's a possibility of overcoming this disease that was like a death sentence. If somebody was told they had cancer, it was a pretty gloomy day. Most people didn't survive. Well, about 5 years later, another interesting thing happened that started to blend all of this information into a focal point. And it was when my mother came home from the Mayo Clinic and she had been diagnosed with cancer. She had melanoma in the 4th and final stage. And the doctors said there was no hope. They said she would only have a few months to live, maybe 6 months tops. And my mother said, okay, well, what kind of treatment are you going to give me? And they said, there is no treatment. She said, chemotherapy? And they said, no, there's no chemotherapy to help you. She said, radiation, how about radiation? And they said, no, radiation doesn't help your type of cancer. So she came home pretty dejected. And I remember hearing her on the phone calling clinics all over the country, wanting to find somebody that would take a chance to try to help her. But when they found out what the doctors at the Mayo Clinic had to say, they discouraged her. There's nothing we can do either. She called as far away as Greece to an experimental clinic over there that was helping people with cancer. And they said, you may not survive the trip over here. Don't waste your time. And I remember one day thinking, I wonder if all this information I've learned, I wonder if it could possibly help my mom. And I remember I had a piece. This was my mom who had nursed me all these years growing up when I was sick, dragging me off to the hospitals, dragging me off to the doctor, and yet now she was in trouble. And I just wondered if maybe somehow the information I had could help her. And I remember approaching her and I said, Mom, I think I know how to beat this thing. And she said, what could you possibly know that the doctors at the Mayo Clinic don't know? And I said, Mom, I think it's pretty simple. They're approaching it in the wrong direction. They're looking at the tumors and they're attacking the tumors. They're wanting to cut them out. They're wanting to poison them. They're wanting to burn them. But that doesn't always work. The cancer seems to want to spread, or the people get really, really sick from the treatments. And oftentimes I think that the people are actually dying of the treatments, not the cancer itself. It's devastating to the immune system to take chemotherapy. You need a strong immune system. Radiation, as we've known from Hiroshima, Chernobyl, it causes cancer. It makes no sense to me that they're treating cancer with things that cause cancer. I said, I think what has happened is you have an internal environment, and when that internal environment gets out of balance, bad things can happen. What we need to do is come up with a plan to change your internal environment back to the way it was before you had cancer. And I know my mom loved me, but she was scared. But it ended up, she said, okay, I'll do whatever you say. So the only way I knew at that time to help somebody become more alkaline was to eat a raw fruit and vegetable diet. Nothing but. That means no animal food whatsoever, no cooked food whatsoever, no canned food. And that was tough for my mom. But she did it. She only drank spring water, only ate raw fruits and vegetables. Well, she was still scared though. She didn't know if that was going to work. There was no history or experience of mine where I'd helped somebody with this kind of a protocol. And so she wanted to keep going back to Mayo Clinic to find out how much time have I got. And this was something she did every couple of weeks. It was an 8-hour trip one way, but every couple of weeks she wanted to go back to find out how much time have I got. Funny thing though, with all their testing, they kept finding out that she was getting better, not worse. Huh. She also took some vitamins. She also took a few herbs. And after 6 months of getting better and better and better, through repeated testing at the Mayo Clinic, they decided to do a second exploratory surgery. The first one had revealed the cancer, and the second one revealed the cancer was gone. The doctor came running out of the operating room to find my dad and my sister, nearly jumping up and down, saying, it's a miracle, there's no cancer. She was still opened up on the operating table. How did he know that? Well, melanoma is an unusual cancer in that it's always black. And so when this doctor looked at her the first time in her first surgery 6 months before, he saw black tumors. When he looked at her the second time, there was no blackness to the tumors. They sent the tumors to the laboratory, they tested them, they were non-cancerous. Mayo Clinic doesn't usually ask for a second opinion, but they sent these tumors out to another laboratory to get a second opinion because it was so unusual. Well, they wouldn't declare her cured, they said, for at least 5 years. So she kept going back and forth to the Mayo Clinic because they convinced her that this kind of cancer spreads or it comes back. I took her myself over 25 times during that 10-year period. But fortunately, there was no cancer. Another thing happened. There was a reporter that wrote an article about her story. He had heard at a cancer support group meeting that she had helped start. She wanted to encourage people not to give up hope. And the article was titled, Miracle Lady Cheats Death. And if you want to, you can go to her website and read her first article. And then there was a follow-up article 10 years later saying Miracle Lady 10 years later was the title. So you can go to miraclelady.net, miraclelady.net, and that's the articles about my mom. Well, we got a lot of phone calls from other people who were dying of cancer because of that article. And so we started sharing the information. They all want to know, what did you do? So we told them. And other people started experiencing miracles. There was another lady who made medical history by delivering a baby full term, even though she had lung cancer and was pronounced terminal. She also made national news. Well, this was rather aggravating to the doctors, and I was surprised by that. I would think that these doctors would want to know, what did these people do? These people were coming back to the doctor, and the doctor was examining them and saying, our tests show you don't have cancer anymore. The tumors are either almost gone or completely gone in a relatively short period of time. And none of these doctors were curious about it. In fact, they were angry about it. They tried to discourage people from going on this raw fruit and vegetable diet and taking supplements, saying there was no reason to do that. There was no science behind it. There was no connection between diet and cancer. Another thing happened. My mom met up with a guy who was a famous cancer doctor. He was actually President Reagan's doctor. She found an article about him and called him on the phone. And we ended up, the three of us, being on a television program, a Christian show that was aired nationwide. And we spent 2 days, 2 hours basically talking about cancer and how to prevent it. And didn't really talk about what to do if you had cancer because we weren't really allowed to. And that's been a pretty interesting thing. But my mom wanted to know if there wasn't an easier way to become more alkaline or change that internal environment. And I said, Mom, this is all I know. And she said, well, keep researching. You need to keep looking for an easier way. And then another prophetic thing. This was the third prophetic thing that I remember happening in my life. I got a call from a scientist in Sweden. And I said, how'd you find out about me? And he said, a friend of mine in Australia. And when I got off the phone, I was nearly jumping up and down, and I told my mom, I said, God's getting ready to do something. And she said, what do you mean? What'd that guy say? And I said, it wasn't anything he said, it's the circumstances. I don't know anybody in Sweden, and I don't know anybody in Australia either. Must have been a newspaper article. And so we started sharing information about what we'd each learned about cancer. And then after many months went by, he said, you know, I believe minerals are far more important than vitamins. And I said, I agree. But what do we do? There are so many mineral products on the market. If they were really as beneficial as we know minerals should be, why aren't there testimonials about people getting healed with these products? We need to search the world over and find the best mineral product. And so we did. And I remember it's a long, involved story of all the research that we did, all the experimenting, all the products we sampled. But eventually he called me up and he said, I think I found it. Coral calcium from Okinawa. And I have to tell you, my heart kind of sank. I thought, that's just what the world needs, another calcium supplement. There were already so many on the market. We knew there wasn't a lot of positive testimonies about these products. But I knew he wouldn't be wasting my time, so I started to investigate it. He connected me with some people that had information and had some products. I even sampled the product. My mom sampled it. You have to understand, I was taking 35 tablets and capsules a day of various supplements. I stopped all that and just used this product. It was a little sachet. It came in a little foil packet. And it was this little miniature tea bag is what it looks like. If I can get it out. And you simply put it in your drinking water and then drink that water throughout the day, preferably a couple of quarts, half gallon. And as you drink that water, a lot of interesting things happen. Let me back up. As you put it into the water, a lot of interesting things happen. First of all, it raises the pH. It makes the water more alkaline. And wow, that was really interesting to me. I had been looking for something that would influence alkalinity. And I thought, wow, that's pretty simple. Put this little tea bag in some water and drink it. You've got alkaline water. That ought to be easier than eating just a raw fruit and vegetable diet. And so I felt better than I ever had in just 3 days. My mom felt better, had more energy, and just seemed to feel her youth coming back. And we started getting other testimonials from people that had used the product that we had sampled out to. And I wondered, how is this working? Well, back to this internal environment, you're 70% water. Your blood's about 90% water. Would it make a difference what kind of water that is? What if you could flush out that water, kind of give yourself an oil change, flush that water out and replace it with the best water in the world? And that's what this is. And what's the evidence? Well, in 1979, the Guinness Book of Records authenticated the world's oldest living man. He was 115 years old and lived on one of the Okinawa Islands at the southern end of Japan. And all the publicity about this guy alerted doctors and scientists in Japan to come and investigate and see what was so unique about him. After an exhaustive inquiry, they found out he wasn't unique at all. In fact, what they found out was that he had lived a long, industrious life. He actually had 2 world records. He had also had the longest career. He had worked until he was 105, and his job involved physical labor. It wasn't until sometime later that a Japanese professor came forward and revealed the secret. He said, it's the water. I've been studying the water for some 40 years around the world, and particularly in Japan, and the water in Okinawa is different than the water on the other islands, and it's different even than any place else in the world. And it's because of the landmass. The landmass is made of an ancient coral reef, much like Hawaii is made of lava. You dig down below the dirt in Hawaii and you hit lava. You dig below the dirt in Okinawa, you hit coral. So all the water these people were drinking had been influenced by these minerals. And he said one more thing. I found out in research that the Japanese Ministry of Health, keeping track of the statistics of why people died for 100 years or more, didn't realize that the people of Okinawa weren't dying at the same rate as those on the other islands of the top 3 causes of death: heart disease, stroke, and cancer. There were 4 times as many people in Okinawa living past 100, or were older than 100 years old, 4 times as many as there were on the other islands. So something crazy was going on there. And this professor said it's the water. In fact, if you look around the world, you'll find there's about 5 or 6 places where people live longer and healthier than people around them, and they always find, after investigation, it's the water. It's always water that was mineral rich. Now you have the opportunity to make that kind of water by just putting these little packets into any old water. You can even use tap water. And what happens? As I said, it creates alkaline water, and it changes your internal water that has maybe, because of dietary influences of what you drink, maybe gotten a little bit too acid, and maybe you were experiencing some health problems. We've had a lot of people that got better. We can't say this treats anything. It doesn't treat anything. We're not treating disease. What we're doing is changing that 70% of you to see if that makes a difference in your health. So it brings up an interesting question. If these people are drinking this water, and I have some testimonies, I'm going to read a few of them here in a minute. If these people are drinking this water, but they were diagnosed with a disease, did they really have a disease? Look, if the remedy was minerals and water, then maybe what they were suffering from was symptoms of mineral deficiency and dehydration. That's what the remedy was, minerals and water. Look, we've all heard of scurvy. Scurvy is a disease. It's listed in the medical books as a disease. It can be deadly, but it's a vitamin C deficiency. No surgery will help. Chemotherapy won't help. Radiation won't help. There's no drugs that will help. The only thing that will help scurvy is vitamin C. It's a vitamin C deficiency. You can't take B vitamins. You can't take D. You can't take anything else except vitamin C, but when you do, the symptoms go away. It's a deficiency. As I read these testimonies, keep in mind, these people had a remedy of minerals and water. One of the most common things we find are people being healed of problems with pain. My own father had headaches for 27 years. 2 weeks drinking this water and his headaches were gone. And some 16, 17 years later, he's still headache free. My mom had a friend with angina. Felt like an elephant was sitting on her chest. She had pains in her chest. Couldn't breathe very well. After drinking this water in less than an hour, her symptoms were gone. But she didn't believe it. She couldn't believe that just drinking some water could get rid of something the doctors couldn't help her with. She's been suffering this for 18 years or so. So she stopped drinking it. And sure enough, a few days later, she had another attack. She drank more water, and again, in less than an hour, her symptoms were gone. Here's a testimonial. When I first was introduced to coral calcium sachets, I had my sister in mind. She had been living with MS for over a year, multiple sclerosis. She had lost the use of her right side and her right eye. She couldn't walk without a cane. She began drinking the coral calcium water and since has regained her vision and the use of her right side. She has no pain and has thrown away her cane. The last time she was in town, she asked me for a good place to go dancing. This is MS. We don't have any cures for MS, but this lady's symptoms were gone from drinking minerals and water. Was it disease or deficiency? You be the judge. Here's another one. I'm sold on light night. My fiance was relieved of pain due to severe back problems within 4 days on night. She tried another coral calcium product. There's knockoffs on the market. This is the original one. It comes from the inventor, the guy that started the whole business in Japan. But there's other people that wanted to get in on the market, but their products aren't as good. This product was supposed to be as good, but the pain came back. As soon as she got back on light, the pain went away. Here's one. Now this will blow your mind. It did me. And I know this guy. I've talked to him on the phone because he called me. It saved my life. I had a blood test and the doctor looked worried. He said my cholesterol was over 800. You know, doctors are jumping all over you to take statin drugs to lower your cholesterol if it's over 160. His was over 800. My triglycerides were so high the equipment couldn't measure it. He said he didn't have long to live. He said I didn't have long to live, the doctor. He looked at my wife and said she should make funeral arrangements. I was scared. Then I found out about light, and after drinking coral water for less than a month, I had my blood retested. My doctor was shocked to see my blood tests were now in the normal range. Soon after I found out about iodine, I gave both products to my father-in-law who had problems with high blood sugar. In just a few days, his blood sugar was normal. Now wait a minute. This guy had high cholesterol. He didn't change his diet. He started drinking water with minerals in it. That's what we have to realize here is these people, none of them are saying I went on a raw fruit and vegetable diet or became a vegetarian. They're not even mentioning anything different that they did except they started drinking this water. So I submit to you, do we need to rethink what disease is? Is it possible that you can possibly change the internal environment to a point where it allows symptoms of what we call disease to exist? When you get that under control, you get it rebalanced, the symptoms go away. Well, we have it happen over and over. These are just shocking. There's one in here that really would bring a tear to your eye. This lady writes in, I have a friend with whose 19-month-old grandson was diagnosed by 3 heart surgeons with a hole in his heart valve that would not allow his heart to rest. They said his condition required surgery. After being on coral water, probably only about 2 weeks, he had another appointment with the doctors as a pre-operative step. The test showed extreme improvement in the condition of his heart and the hole was closing up. Surgery canceled. Surgery canceled. I mentioned another product in these testimonials tonight. Interesting thing happened. I kept looking at these little sachets, and no matter how long I left them in the water, even if I dumped them out, the granules didn't dissolve. And I kept thinking, because I had this mega dose mentality, if 500 milligrams of vitamin C is good for you, what happens if you take 5,000? My mom was taking 45,000 a day while she was trying to overcome her cancer. How could it be? These granules don't dissolve, and yet people drink this water. It didn't make sense to me. But I had to start rethinking. It's the water. The water has become like a tonic. These minerals are affecting that water, even on a molecular level. On this website, you'll see pictures that Dr. Emoto, a Japanese scientist, took of water freezing, droplets of tap water versus water that he added aqualite to and took other photographs, and now the water changed from some irrecognizable shape to a beautiful crystalline snowflake structure. More evidence that this changes the molecular structure of the water. As I said before, what would happen if you change the water, that's 70% of you. So I kept trying to figure out a way, did some experiments, couldn't figure it out. One day I got a call from this lady, and she's asked me questions about, well, it wanted me to give her some ammunition to talk to her doctor about it. And during that conversation, she gave me, or led me to the secret to dissolve these granules. And I was able to come up with this other product, and I ended up marrying this girl. Well, what else could I do? I was either going to have to marry her or shoot her. She knew too much. And we've been married for 15 years. What did I have, though? A liquid version of these coral granules? That's what I thought. But in the process, I used organic complexes from plants to help to get these granules to dissolve. Now, to let you know what organic complexes are, we all know, or you should know by now, that our soils are mineral deficient because of chemical farming. Most nutritionists out there would tell you that you need to take a mineral supplement because the soils are deficient, the plants aren't taking up the minerals, they're not passing them on to the fruits and vegetables we eat. We're mineral deficient as well as the plants and the soils. But I got a secret for you. You can't bypass the plant. The plant's a factory. How else can you explain getting a red tomato from a green plant? They're manufacturing things. And I found out something interesting in my research, that when the plants are grown in mineral deficient soil, the fruits and vegetables have fewer nutrients. There's a direct correlation between the nutrients in the fruits and vegetables and the level of minerals in the soil. I don't have time to tell you everything about how that works, but plants need minerals to manufacture nutrients. Especially the building blocks which are in the organic complexes. Organite has those building blocks. It has traces of amino acids, traces of vitamins, traces of enzymes, and of course minerals. All the minerals that you need are in there. The complete source of minerals from the like coral minerals, which is the most complete source of minerals on Earth, according to my research. And I started to take this product, and I wondered the same, what was it going to do for me? And in a very short amount of time, I don't even remember if it was the first day or if it was within a couple, 3 days, but all my digestive problems disappeared. I had severe problems with acid reflux, even had a hiatal hernia, all gone after putting this in my water along with light in just a very short time. Then I had an accident. I injured my leg really bad on some jagged concrete. The pain was so severe I started to go into a mild shock. My wife looks at my leg, it's got this big bump on it, looked like somebody stuck a hard-boiled egg under my skin, and this big massive bruise that was starting to turn black and purple very quickly. And she said, "You want me to put cyanide on it?" And I'm like, "I don't care." I had no hope that this was going to help. She started spraying cyanide on my leg, and I'm not kidding you, within less than 2 hours, the bump was gone, and so was the bruise. Now, doctors tell me, when I've made this presentation before with other audiences, they said, "We can believe a lot of things you're saying, but you can't get rid of a bruise in less than 2 hours. It takes at least 7 to 10 days. You don't do it in 2 hours." Well, later on, my wife fell down some stairs, ended up with a big bump and bruise on her leg, sprayed cyanide on there. We knew what to do now. Sprayed it on there, and the bump and bruise were gone in less than 5 minutes. We have witnesses. What else will it do? Well, that spring, in our little 5-acre little country estate, little farmhouse, I planted a garden where I've been making my own compost, growing organic fruits and vegetables, and I got a little too early with my tomato plants. The severe frost came, killed them all. I'm out in the garden starting to pull them up because they were black, laying flat on the ground, and my wife comes out there and she says, "Did you think about putting cyanide on them?" And I just laughed. I said, "Honey, they're dead. They wouldn't have any way to circulate it. She said, well, if they're dead, it wouldn't hurt them, would it? What do you do? So I didn't even know how to make it up, but I put a tablespoon per gallon of water and put a half a gallon of water on each one of these plants. 3 days later, I came back out to my garden, and these plants were dark green, standing up straight. They grew twice as big as any plants we'd ever grown before. Without the frost damage, we're now able to grow 8-foot tall tomato plants. Not kidding. So it helped the plants, and I started wondering, what else can it do? And I started to get feedback from other people as I started to pass this product out. And they were saying, it has a high energy. And I said, a high energy? Huh, never even thought of that. But as we started to learn more and more about it, we realized that it did have a high energy, and we later on even found a way to enhance that energy even more. But I want to tell you a little demonstration of that. There was a company interested in marketing our product, and when we were talking to the head of product research and development about this energy thing, he said, our people in the lab don't know what you're talking about. Our entire research team that I've talked to about this whole concept of energy and water and minerals, they don't know what you're talking about. But we'd like to do an experiment. We're going to put 24 bottles of water, unlabeled, they'll just be numbered, into a case. We're going to send it to you. We want you to test it with that computer you were talking about. Let us know which bottle we put in 5 drops of cyanide. We had it tested. The people called back and said, we can't test this water. And we said, what do you mean? You've tested all these other samples for us. They said, well, it's not that we can't test it, it's that all of them test exactly the same. That 5 drops of cyanide had influenced all 23 other bottles, even though it never made contact with the water. Why would that make a difference to you and I? Another funny thing, I had a fall 25 years prior to the cyanide and nearly broke my neck. I was a chronic patient of my chiropractor. Had one recurring question almost every time I went there for 25 years. I said, why don't I hold my adjustments? He said, we don't know. This man was taught by the son of the guy that invented chiropractic. He was a chiropractic historian. He written many articles about the subject. He was on the board of the first chiropractic college. His brother was a chiropractor. His nephew was a chiropractor. This guy knew a lot about the subject, and yet he had no idea why you don't hold your adjustments. And after I started taking it, I didn't even realize at first, but months later, I told my wife, I said, I haven't needed the chiropractor. And she said, neither have I. Now, she had been in a bad car wreck and had whiplash, but after starting tonight, she didn't need to go to the chiropractor anymore. Why would that be? Because you need energy. Acupuncturists know that. They're poking people with needles and getting results, unblocking energy fields, and I wonder, where do you get that energy in the first place? How were we designed to have an energy field, and how were we supposed to replenish that energy field from things that we take into our bodies? Because that's how everything else works. And I finally figured it out. It was from minerals. Minerals carry energy. Cyanide has minerals that are energized. These minerals are also naturally energized. It'll build up your energy system. Some have called this liquid acupuncture because it's so effective, as I've told you, topically. Let me tell you a few testimonies about that. I could stand up here for 4 or 5 more hours telling you things. I'm giving you a brief description of what I've learned about these products. But here's a testimonial. This was somebody from my church. She said, I met Fred Kaufman at church. After church one Sunday, a group of us went out to eat. I had a bad headache and wasn't having much fun. Fred was there and told me to try putting a few droppers of cyanide under my tongue and hold it for 2 minutes, then swallow. In less than 10 minutes, the headache was gone. How could that be? Here's another one. Recently, I experienced indigestion with visible, painful bloating after lunch. I put several droppers of cyanide in my water that I drank while working, and before I knew it, both the digestion and bloating went away. This one was particularly interesting. I met this lady at a presentation that I gave one time several years ago. I suffered with psoriasis for over 20 years. I had an open hole in my stomach, a ½ inch deep and an inch long. I lived with bandages all over my body and my skin shed horribly. I tried numerous medications, none of which ever worked. I started applying night daily to my open sores and drank the coral water. Within 4 days, the hole had started to close and my psoriasis started to dry up. Every open sore now has new skin starting to form on it, and the hole is completely closed and scar tissue has formed over it. This lady told me that the doctors had even tried giving her chemotherapy, treating her as though she had skin cancer. Nothing helped. Here's another one. I had severe pounding headache when I remember someone recommended taking night. Within 15 minutes, my headache was gone. I told a friend of church about it who has severe migraine headaches. He took some night home and set a timer. And 30 minutes later, I got a call from him he said he had watched the clock until his headache, which he had had for 2 weeks, disappeared 15 minutes. Now that sounds pretty incredible, but there's something else even greater than that. We've seen cellular regeneration. There was a cook at a restaurant that cut off the pad of his index finger. He went to the hospital and they said, without that piece of flesh, there's nothing we can do. And he didn't have that piece of flesh. It probably ended up in somebody's soup, who knows. But they cleaned it, bandaged it, and on his way home, he stopped by the restaurant and told the manager, who happened to be a friend of ours, and said, I won't be into work for a few days. And the restaurant manager had a bottle of night. And she said, here, take this home with you. Drip it on the bandage. Don't even unwrap it. Just drip it on the bandage. Let it soak through the gauze. Do that several times a day. 6 days later, he unwrapped that finger and it had completely grown back. The flesh grew back. The skin grew back. He even had a fingerprint. The finger was numb because he had cut the nerves, which loop at the end of your fingers. And the nerves had grown back. He had feeling in his finger again. That's cellular regeneration. How does your body do that? It can't unless you have the raw materials. Your cells can do miraculous things if they have the raw materials. There's raw materials in here that your body needs. There was a lady who had a stroke, paralyzed on the right side. Been that way for over a year. It happened to be that her live-in nurse was a friend of my wife's. And she said, Kim, I've injured my shoulder in a car accident. I wonder if your night would help. In 4 days, all of her pain was gone. It was as though she had surgery in the middle of the night. So she starts putting it into the feeding tube of this lady that she was taking care of that was paralyzed with this stroke, who, by the way, also had Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. In 2 weeks, she walked into the room and was startled that the lady was trying to pull herself up in bed. And she said, oh my, how are you feeling? And the lady turned to her in perfect English, said, you know, I believe I'm feeling much better today, thank you. Well, a pretty good indication that the Alzheimer's was clearing up. So she upped the amount. Now, she was only giving her a quarter. These droppers only fill up halfway. She was only giving her half of a dropper, a quarter of a dropper, once a day in a feeding tube. That happened in 2 weeks. She decides to up the ante. Now, she's given her 1/2 of a dropper. That's not even a dosage we recommend for children. 2 weeks go by, she walks in, and now the lady is exercising her once paralyzed arm and leg. How's that happen? Look, if you've had a stroke, blood supply has shut off from one side of your brain to the other. Whichever side the blood is shut off from, the opposite side is paralyzed. Doctors say that if they can't open that up and get blood flowing again, because of oxygen deprivation, your cells die en masse within 12 to 15 hours. She had been paralyzed with this condition for over a year. How did all of a sudden she start using her right side again? There had to be cellular regeneration. Your body can do miraculous things if it has what it needs. I could go on and on and on and on. There are no side effects from these products. You can give them to children. Even babies have had these products with no problems. It's water and minerals. And it's not some massive amounts of minerals that you have to consult with your doctor to find out, is this safe? if anything, your doctor would say there's not enough in either one of those products to do anything for you. But yet we have the testimonies to prove it. I just want to leave you with this one statement. Is it possible for the truth to be so unbelievable that it escapes becoming known? Yeah, I've experienced it. And all I wanted to do was to share with you what I've experienced in trying to help people. And trying to help people with just 2 products. Is this all you need? I don't know. But I do know this. This is the foundation of health. If you don't start with the water that's 70% of your body, 90% of your blood, just about anything else you do is icing on a cake. What's in the cake? The foundation is water and minerals. You need air, of course, but you need water more than you need food. Again, I thank you for listening to me today. I hope I didn't bore you too badly, but go to these websites and look at the information and make a choice for yourself to do something about your health. Thank you.